Pleasure to introduce Erin Gless, who is going to kind of turn our attention to one of our favorite baleen whale species here in the Salish Sea. So Erin has been spending a lot of time tracking the humpback whales who are in this area in increasing numbers. So she's going to talk about that. Erin is a naturalist with Island Adventures, and she's going to talk to us about the humpback whales of the Salish Sea. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Cindy and everyone. Again, my name is Erin, and I'm here today to talk about a really neat piece of technology that came out a few years ago known as Happywhale. And just curious to gauge the audience, raise your hand if you have ever heard of Happywhale before. Okay, I see a good amount of hands. It was actually just featured on an episode of PBS Nature a couple of weeks ago, so that was a really good bit of exposure for them. So of those of you that raised your hands that you've heard of Happywhale, how many of you are actually submitting photographs to Happywhale and using it? Okay, not as many hands. And I see a lot of hands that are not up at all, and you are the folks that I really want to talk to today, because Happywhale is the type of program that works better the more people are using it. And so I'm going to go over today how Happywhale works, how easy it is to use, and some of the really interesting things that we are learning about whales thanks to this program. So Happywhale was developed for primarily humpback whales, so just a really quick primer on humpbacks. They're about the size of a bus, 40 to 50 feet long, 50 to 80,000 pounds. We think they can live a pretty long time, about 80 years or so. And diet, they're not super picky eaters. They are baleen whales, so they'll eat pretty much anything that can get stuck in those baleen plates. So krill, lots of different types of bait fish. They're pretty generalist feeders. It's one of the reasons that they have adapted really well in a variety of different areas. Speaking of those different areas, this is a map of the populations of humpbacks that are around the world. They're pretty widely distributed. There's 14 populations right now that we know of. As a kind of general trend, humpback whales are going to be feeding in cooler waters, and then they migrate to warmer waters to breed and give birth. And theirs is one of the longest mammal migrations on Earth. They average about 10 to 12,000 miles round trip every year. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in just a bit. As far as humpback whale identification goes, humpbacks are, in my opinion, the easiest type of whale to identify. It's probably why I like identifying them so much, is because it's so easy compared to, say, orcas and fin whales and things like that. They can be identified by unique markings on the underside of their tails, as well as the outline of their tails as well, so with the little peaks and valleys along the trailing edge. These markings can change a little bit over time, but by the time the whale is about 2 to 3 years old, those patterns are fairly well solidified. If you are a whale with dark flukes over your life, you might get white colored scars. If you are a whale that has mostly white flukes, you'll develop dark scars if there's any injury. And here in the Salish Sea, we have humpback whales that are pretty much entirely dark flukes. We have whales that are nearly entirely white, and pretty much every ratio in between. And then, as I mentioned, the little ridges and peaks and valleys as well can be used to identify, especially this whale over here on the left-hand side of the screen is a whale known as divot. She has a very pronounced divot in the side of her fluke, and so little marks like that can help us tell them apart as well. And for a very, very long time, if you were researching humpback whales, you did it on a fairly local scale. So perhaps you studied humpbacks in Alaska and you had photographs of your population there. Maybe in Hawaii, you had your own catalog. In New England, you had your own catalog. But there was not a whole lot of sharing of that information. Not necessarily because it was proprietary, it just wasn't easy to share that type of information across long distances. In 2004, a really, really big study was undertaken to help kind of bridge that gap a little bit. And so from 2004 to 2006, the SPLASH study, which stands for Structures of Population, Levels of Abundance, and Status of Humpback Whales. You can see why SPLASH is much easier, so we refer to it as the SPLASH study. But this took place over 3 seasons, so from 2004 to 2006, in all of the North Pacific. Anywhere that there was a known humpback breeding ground or a known humpback feeding ground, More than 50 different research groups, 400 researchers, 10 different countries participated in this study. It was a huge scale, nothing had ever been done like it before, and the goal was to learn more about humpback whale travel patterns, behavior, and population status. At the end of this 3-season study, nearly 20,000 different photographs were taken of different humpback whale tails, and they came up with nearly 8,000 unique individuals that they were able to identify. So this was really the first step in learning a lot more about humpback whale travel patterns in the North Pacific. Now, during the time of the splash study, if you wanted to match a humpback whale to a catalog or to another area, you did it the old-fashioned way. So you take your photograph, and then you're going to go through the catalog, picture by picture, and see if that whale has ever been photographed before. A lot of times, this is the grunt work. So this is done by volunteers and interns, unpaid, folks, because it takes a lot of time, and there's not a lot of funding for projects like this. I used to do this for a couple of seasons for Alaska Whale Foundation. So in the wintertime here in Washington, while whale watching kind of slows down, they would send me a big batch of 100, 200 photos in the catalog, and I would just sit on my couch with some wine and go through those photos. Hopefully my wine didn't affect the validity of any study. But I actually really liked doing this. But one of the downsides of this is that it didn't usually happen until the end of a field season because it takes so much time. And so you could be out there for months and months taking photos of humpback whales, but you really never started to even analyze those photos until things slowed down. So it could be 9, 10 months before you were able to find out what humpback whales you were even watching. And then I lost my job as an Alaska Whale Foundation volunteer because Happywhale came along. They no longer needed me, but it's a good thing. So I'll tell you a little bit about this program. In 2014, Ted Cheeseman, along with co-founder Ken Sutherland, developed Happywhale. And the goal was basically to make a splash study 2.0, to build on that collaborative spirit and make it easy to share humpback whale sightings globally across all those different research organizations. Happywhale works by cross-referencing known whale catalogs like Cascadia Research Collective, Allied Whale, but it also, in addition to comparing with catalogs, compares with any other photo that's been submitted by citizen scientists around the world. And you are the citizen scientists in this room, so if you didn't know it yet, you're all whale researchers, and I'm going to, hopefully by the end of this talk, convince you of that. Happywhale is very easy to use. The first step is to just sign up. So you just go to happywhale.com. This is completely free. You'll enter your email address, make a password, and from then on, you are ready to start basically contributing to humpback whale science. First step, we need photos to submit. And so you're gonna get out there on the water and look for humpback whales. Whether you go out with a whale watching operation, I know some of you in this room mentioned you have your own boats, which is awesome, or if you just happen to live in a really lucky location where you might be able to see whales from shore, awesome. But the bottom line is we need to get photos of those whales. And we're looking for something very specific to use in Happywhale. You want a photo that's well lit, so you don't want it to be so bright that there's glare, but you also don't want it to be so dark that you can't see the color patterns on the underside. You want to try to take the photo at a minimal angle, so you want to be as straight of a photo as possible. And also you want to have the underside of the tail. That's what we're using to identify our whales. So these two photos on top, this is definitely what all wildlife photographers love, that cascading waterfall. They're horrible ID photos, okay? So take some for your own personal use, but that's not what we want to see at Happywhale. This next one here, I'd say, is kind of a medium photo. This is definitely good enough to get a match in the Happywhale system, but it is at a little bit of an angle. A little bit of the fluke is still underwater. So the gold standard is this bottom photo here. That tail is nice and high up out of the water. It's pretty much straight on, and you're looking at the underside of the tail. So you're aiming for shots like that, really great looks at the tail. If you are an overachiever and you want some extra credit, in addition to that fluke picture, if you are able to get a profile shot of that whale's dorsal fin, you can submit that as well, but I do have a few caveats with this. The first is that it has to be a really good dorsal photo, so like this, pretty much a perfect profile. The second is that they are not using dorsal fins to make IDs with humpback whales. So if you were to just submit that photo, it's not going to go anywhere. We're using the tails primarily for happy whale. But we don't always get to see our humpback whale's tail. If they're not diving deep, or if they're just resting at the surface, they're not always going to show that fluke. And so where the dorsal fin comes in is if you have a pretty good hunch of who you think that whale might be, you can log in and the dorsal photo is supplemental information, okay? So it's not gonna be submitted alone, but if you do have a good one, by all means submit it. It'll simply make the profile of that particular whale stronger. My one bit of advice is please make sure that you do not do that step unless you are 100% sure that that dorsal fin matches that tail that you are submitting. If you're just watching one whale, there's pretty much no question. You know that it belongs to them, but sometimes when we're out there and there's 10, 12 humpback whales all up and down at the same time, it's really hard to be able to prove that that dorsal fin belongs to a particular tail, and we don't want to mess up the catalog. So only do it if you're really, really sure. What we're really, really looking for is the tail photo. Once you have your photos, you go back home, log into your account, and you're going to click on the button in the middle that says Submit Images. And this part is really simple. Basically, you submit your photo without editing it. Please do not edit your pictures before you submit them to Happywhale. So don't mess with the color, don't crop them. The computer will do all of the work for you. We want them as is. And you follow the prompts. You just drag your photo into this little box here, hit continue, and then you're going to be asked some more details about your particular sighting. One of the things it will ask you is the date and time of your sighting. The really neat thing with digital photography is that in most cases this is already embedded in your file, so you don't even have to think about it. It'll just automatically show up. So this photo that we're submitting here came from September 2017 around noon, and that is part of the file, so it'll auto-complete that for you. Next thing down, this is pretty neat. A lot of whale watching boats have their own Happywhale accounts, and so if you were out on a whale watching trip when you got your picture, you can pick that from the menu, and what that means is that not only will you receive a match notification if your whale is found, but the company that you were out with will also get that notification as well. So if you were out with a whale watching company, if they have a profile, you can definitely pick that. If not, you don't need to fill that out if it's just your own boat. You can actually name your boat and start a profile for your boat too. The location, this is going to be also very important. There is a field where you can enter the latitude and longitude, so if you happen to know the exact coordinates of where you were when you took that picture, great. Some cameras do have that in there as well. But if not, a general location is fine. They have a little map, and you can stick a pin where you think that sighting happened. And the general location, as close as you can get, is still gonna give us a lot of information. And then down at the bottom, there is a notes field. If there's anything worth mentioning, maybe you saw the whale with what you thought could be a calf. That's something that might be interesting. Maybe you saw the whale not looking very good. Maybe they looked like they were injured or sick or something like that. Those are all things that would go in that notes field. And then you hit submit, and your work is done. Now the algorithm is going to take over. So Happywhale uses an algorithm that actually came out of a Google competition. So they held a Google competition, and the prize winner is the algorithm that Happywhale chooses to use. Back when they were doing the splash study about 15 years ago, going through by hand, matching every photo one by one, they had about a 91% success rate of finding matches. With the algorithm that Happywhale uses, it's about a 99% accuracy rate, and it does it in 1/40th of the time. Yeah, so not only is it faster, but it's also more accurate, so it's a win-win. I will let you know that every single match is confirmed manually before it is sent to you. So there is actually a set of human eyes that will look at every proposed match. This is a sample of the screen that you see. And Happywhale has a few paid scientists on staff. They also have volunteers that help with this as well. So they'll take a look at the proposed matches. The picture on the left is the one that was submitted, and I just went through telling you how to take a perfect whale photo. That's what you're aiming for, but as you can see here on the left, that's not a perfect whale photo. Some of it's a little bit under the water, it's at an angle, but enough of that whale tail is showing to match in the system. So it ran through the computer, and this is the whale on the right that it proposed as the match, and you can see the score there is nearly 80%, it's 78% sure that that's a match. So super simple, a person just looks at that and says, oh, yep, that's the same whale, and then hits submit, and that's how the match is made. If your photo quality is good and it runs through the computer program and no match comes up, that's a new whale. And so it's kind of a bummer because you don't get to learn anything about the whale up to that point, but it's a very important submission because that is a whale that has not yet been photographed, or at least not yet photographed and submitted to this program. If it does come up with a match, you'll get an email notification, and you can set your preferences on this. So if you want to get them daily, if you want to get them weekly, if you only want to get them if it's, you know, a very special whale to you, who knows. But you can adjust that, so you're not going to be bombarded with updates if you don't want them. But basically this is what those notifications look like. And I know the print's a bit small, but you can read them, and one example, the third one down, says, you know, Happywhale split fin. That's one of our local whales here. He was encountered on October 21st, 2011. You saw that whale on July 14th, 2018. So what that means is someone was going through old photos from 2011, they sent them in, and the system made a match. And that's actually a good point. These do not have to be new pictures. In fact, if you have old pictures, that's a really good bit of data because back then there probably weren't a lot of folks sharing that information. So if you went out on a whale watching trip 10 years ago and are just now getting around to your photos, send them in. I bet we might learn some really interesting things from that. Down at the bottom, you'll see that a whale that we saw in August of 2016 went through the system and was deemed to be new to science. And so it was added to the catalog and got a new ID number. So kind of neat. You're helping to actually catalog whales. If you click on any one of those submissions, you'll be taken to that whale's specific page or profile, however you'd like to refer to it as. And it's really neat. You'll get a map, and on that map, each point is a submission, and those are interactive. So you can click on the point. It'll tell you when that picture was taken. You can see the actual picture that was sent in. You can see who the photographer was or what boat it was taken on. And this is also searchable, so it's not just in response to a sighting that you put up. If you want to learn more about a specific whale, you go to happywhale.com, you can type in that whale's name or number, and you'll come up with these pages. So basically, that's the type of notification you'll get if there is a match made, and then the final step is just to keep doing that over and over again. So rinse and repeat. I once asked Ted Cheeseman, who again is the one that started this, are we annoying you by sending you all of these pictures? Because we send them a lot of photos throughout the year. And he said, no, it's the opposite. I would not mind if I had every single photo ever taken of these whales. It only helps. So don't be shy. You're not going to annoy them by bombarding them with sightings. He wants all of them. And that's for a few reasons. One is that even if you already know who a whale is, providing those new photos helps the algorithm work better. So that algorithm is working by matching specific points on the tail. So every picture that they get helps to complete that image. And also if there's any changes over the years, having new photos helps. So especially in the whale watching community around here, a lot of the naturalists are really good about looking at whales and being able to tell you who they are just by sight. But still go through that process of submitting the photos. It helps the program work better. Also, by providing multiple submissions, it helps us learn more about the whale's behavior. So if you saw a whale in one spot in April, and then maybe 2 months later you saw it in a slightly different spot in June or so, still send both of them in, because that will tell us whether or not over the course of a season a whale is moving a long distance. It might tell us that they're not moving at all and they like to hang out in one particular place. So again, just because you did it once, don't think that that's over. Keep doing it. It really doesn't matter. And you saw it doesn't take much time at all. You just drag the photo and submit. And please, I cannot emphasize this enough. If you are scientists, naturalists, or just folks that like whales and happen to see one, every single submission is weighed the same. It just goes into the computer. They're all equally valuable. So don't be intimidated if you're not, an experienced marine biologist or anything like that. Just send them in. They're just going to be helpful. I wanted to share these next few slides because they were very surprising to me. When I first decided to do this talk, I reached out to Ted, and he was kind enough to send me some of the slides that he presented at the World Marine Mammal Conference in Barcelona last month. And this was very surprising to me because I was always just submitting and enjoying the magic when a match came back to me. I didn't really understand how it worked. I told you that we're looking for high quality images, but high quality is a little bit subjective. This is what we would consider to be a good or high quality image. So take a good look at these pictures. This is about 865 pixels. That translates to about 1/5 of your iPhone screen. Okay, so that's the size that we're looking for. And at that photo quality, they are making 99% of the matches. All right? What surprised me is that when we go down to just fair quality, so about 100 pixels, less than 3% the size of your phone, it's still making 99% of matches. It's not until we get down to really poor quality images, 1% of your tiny phone screen, that we go down to half and half. So look at these quality images. They're very, very blurry, but even if you send in this quality image, the computer's gonna match half of the time. So there's really nothing to lose. So if you don't have expensive camera equipment, if you're not a professional photographer, it's still worth giving it a try because there's a 50-50 chance that they'll be able to figure out who that whale was from your photo. So definitely don't be shy, submit those pictures. There are still a bit of challenges that the algorithm's dealing with. One of them is partial flukes, and that's simply because you're only seeing a small part of the whale tail, so there's not as many points to match, so it's not as successful. You can see very easily these are not the same whale, but this is the closest proposed match in the system. It's only about a 28% match. So this would not be accepted, but that is something that they're hoping to continue to develop down the road to be able to improve those partial fluke matches. Another challenge for the program is injuries. The whale picture on the left was taken in 2006. On the right, that's the same whale in 2017 with a very severe propeller injury. So is taken off a good portion of that tail. Now in this case, Happywhale was able to make a match. There's enough of the tail showing, but it's this type of dramatic injury over time that would lead to that 1% that doesn't get matched. Another challenge is changes over time. So on the left, this is a calf that was photographed in 2016 down in Monterey Bay, California. It was nicknamed by the locals Pepper. And then on the right, this was a picture taken in 2019, and the local whale watching community down in Monterey named this whale Vertigo. Well, they submitted it to Happywhale, and Pepper is Vertigo. This is kind of cool. So the flukes on calves can be a little bit milky or hazy for that first year or two of their life. They don't really get that contrast until they're a few years older. So folks were upset that they never saw poor little Pepper again. They didn't realize that they had been watching Pepper for a couple of years, but just calling it Vertigo. And I've highlighted some of those changes. You can see that in the top photo from when the whale's a calf, the barnacles are still attached, and then they've fallen off over time, making those rings. And once you see it like that, it seems very obvious, but if you're not looking for that association, I can see how they would have missed it. So Happywhale caught that, which is pretty cool. Around the world, as of November of last year, Happywhale has received nearly 300,000 images. And of those images, they have identified more than 30,000 individual humpback whales. The population around the world right now is thought to be about 140,000 or so that's a pretty good chunk, in more than 70,000 ID'd encounters. You can see on this map, the numbers indicate how many submissions are in that location. So you can see that here along the west coast of the United States, which is where Happywhale started, Ted lives in Santa Cruz, California, lots of representation. He also does a lot of field work in Antarctica, so Antarctica is pretty well represented. But there's also a lot of places where we don't have very many submissions, and that's another reason I want to tell you that, because I know a lot of folks in this room are very well traveled, and particularly traveling for the purpose of watching wildlife in other places. And so if you go to any of those remote spots, not only make sure you're taking photos, but if you go out on a whale watching boat and they have not heard of Happywhale, let them know. A lot of the submissions for this come from whale watching companies, more so than even researchers. Researchers have very limited budgets, very limited field seasons. Whale watching companies are usually out there for a much longer period of time, so they can really contribute a lot of valuable information. We've learned some neat things from Happywhale. One of the longest journeys belongs to a male nicknamed Trans-Pacific. You can see why. He was photographed in Tonga in 2010 and then off of Costa Rica in 2018. That's 6,420 miles. That is definitely a very long migration, and it is one of the longest ones in Happywhale records. Longest time between sightings, this is a neat one. There's a North Atlantic humpback whale nicknamed Hepzibah. First photographed July 1977, not photographed again until July 2017. That is 40 years between sightings. And this one makes me feel good because sometimes as a naturalist we get really invested in our local whales, and if we don't see one for a year or two we start to get a little bit nervous. I'm just going to believe that they're out there. So 40 years can pass and I'll still hold out hope that they might be out there, just haven't paid us a visit. And then the record for most sightings is a whale nicknamed Fran. She is popular in California. She has 126 different submissions, and one of them is mine. Some of you may have seen this photo circulating online. In October, I went down to visit some friends that work in Monterey Bay, California. She has a whale watching company. And we were out on the boat watching a pair of humpback whales. They were pretty sleepy, you know, just swimming along, nothing too crazy. And then all of a sudden, simultaneously, they both jump up out of the water. And we were all excited because that doesn't happen very often, and we were stoked that we got the picture. And about a minute or two later, everybody's phones start going off, and it's text messages saying, "Are you okay with the earthquake?" And we say, "What earthquake?" We were out on a boat, so we didn't feel it. But there was a 4.7 magnitude earthquake very close by, and when we checked the timestamps on our cameras when that photo was taken, it matched perfectly with the hydrophone recording of that underwater rumble from the earthquake from Monterey Bay Aquarium. So, can I prove that they were breaching because of the earthquake? No, but you would have to work really hard to convince me that that's not what it was. So Fran is the larger animal on the left in that photo. Yeah, right place, right time. Now this one is for London. Happywhale's not just working on whales. They are working on other types of whales. So in addition to humpback whales, they are branching out. They're starting to work on orcas, fin whales, minke whales, using dorsal fins. But they're also branching out to non-whale species. And one of those species are leopard seals. I knew we were going to talk about leopard seals today, so maybe when Ted gets back from Antarctica this season, you should touch base with him. But as London mentioned, you can identify them by the markings, and for this purpose, they're using just the left side of the face, but you can see those spots are unique. And so this is still very, very much in the infancy. I think there's only about a dozen of these types of sightings, but that is on the horizon, so stay tuned for developments like that. All right, really quickly, I do want to talk a bit about how we're using Happywhale specifically here in the Salish Sea. Let's go back to that photo that we submitted, our beautiful fluke shot. This is a whale nicknamed Heather, also sometimes known as Killer. She's one of our more famous humpback whales in this area. The Heather comes from this H on the fluke, so Heather. Killer does not come from, you know, her murderous tendencies or anything like that. It's because she has a mark that some think look like a killer whale, dorsal fin. So Heather is, as I mentioned, one of our most well-known humpback whales in this area. If you look at the Happywhale entry, it says that the first one is 2007. That's just the earliest photo that's been uploaded to Happywhale. We know that she's been here before that. We have a lot of sightings of her here in the Salish Sea, but we don't have any sightings of her outside of this area. So we really like to match her to a breeding ground as opposed to here, which is a cold water feeding ground. So we don't have a match of Heather, but we have a pretty good idea of where she might go in the winter, because in 2006, Heather had a calf split fluke, and split fluke has been seen in Mexico. And so it makes sense that if you were born in Mexico, that's probably where you yourself would go. And so we think that heather is probably part of that Mexican population as well. And this is further supported by the fact that in 2017, Split Fluke had a calf, and that calf Valiant was also photographed off of Mexico. So we don't have a match for heather, but we have 2 generations after her that were both matched to Mexico. So I think that's pretty good evidence that heather probably goes to Mexico as well. In addition to our Mexican population here in the Salish Sea, we also get whales that go to Hawaii. We have a whale, Apollo, that's part of the Hawaii breeding population. She usually spends more time up near North Vancouver Island, but to get there, she comes through the Salish Sea, and she was actually the first humpback whale that we saw in Island Adventures last year as she was making her way up. And just like with heather and Split Fluke and Valiant that all went to Mexico, Apollo in 2018 had a calf Nova, and Nova also was matched to Hawaii. So again, it makes sense. You probably go to the same breeding grounds where you were born. These types of sightings are always really nice with Happywhale when you get a match of a young calf, because those first couple of years for a calf are really tough. They have a lot of challenges. And so when you hear that a little 1-year-old made a really long migration all on its own, that's, gives you the warm and fuzzies. So, so Nova seems to be doing okay. And these are some of the interesting things that we're learning about our breeding patterns here in the Salish Sea. I will tell you, however, that when it comes to cetacean research, nothing is ever clear-cut like that, okay? In researching for this talk, I found 3 whales that were just not following the pattern. All right, so this is a whale, Stripe. In 1997, Stripe was seen off of Lahaina, Hawaii. In 2017, seen near Loreto, Mexico. So 20 years apart, started off in Hawaii and then seen in Mexico. Another whale that we saw exhibited similar behavior. 2007, this whale, Flint, was seen in Hawaii. 2018, in Guerrero, Mexico. That's pretty far south on the mainland Mexican peninsula. And then this one is particularly interesting, a whale, Puffer. We don't have a match of Puffer in the Salish Sea. It is a whale from our Salish Sea catalog, but no one has ever submitted that photo to Happywhale, so it's not on the map. But in 1984, Puffer was seen in Hawaii. 1991, Socorro Islands, Mexico. 2019, last year, back in Hawaii. So for the other 2, you could say that, oh, well, maybe they were going to Hawaii for a while and then they just, something caused them to switch. But this one switched back and forth. So maybe it's a little bit more fluid than we thought. And one theory that I have, if anyone has any other theories, you can, shoot me an email, but we don't know the gender on any of these 3 whales. And I'd be really curious if they're males, spreading the gene pool around to different breeding locations. So I'd be very curious to know if in the future anyone does get any genetic samples or anything like that on these particular animals. So this is really fun. It's always interesting to know where our whales go, but there is a deeper implication that we get from Happywhale, and that has to do with population health. In 2016, 9 of the 14 populations of humpbacks around the world were deemed to no longer be endangered. They were all nearly wiped out from whaling, but after protection, many of them have rebounded to great numbers. So the Hawaiian population was completely taken off the list. They're listed not at risk. The Mexican population is still listed as threatened. So it's nice to know where our humpback whales go, because it helps to monitor their overall health. We'll have a better idea of what those population numbers are, where they're feeding, what threats they might experience. And what we see here in the Salish Sea is indicative of what was happening around the world. Worldwide populations of humpbacks increasing, and so they started to come back into this area where they had been wiped out. This is a great graph from Cascadia. You can see basically 0 humpbacks 20, 25 years ago. We got a big boom 10 years ago, huge boom 5 years ago, and now we're off the chart. We have about 400 to 500 identified humpback whales now. It's not to say that there's always 400 to 500 here, it's just that's how many over the years we have documented. But this is really encouraging to see this, exponential increase. It's not happening everywhere, and this is where Happywhale comes in as being important again. In Hawaii, sightings are down about 50 to 80% over the last couple of years of humpback whales. Same in Glacier Bay, Alaska. That's another popular place where people used to go to see humpbacks. In 2018, it was the lowest sighting since 2002, down by more than half. So what Happywhale can tell us is, are these whales dying? Are they not reproducing? Or are they just going somewhere else? That's what we would hope to solve. Here in the Salish Sea, we have some really unique opportunities to study humpbacks because geographically, to get into the Salish Sea, you either come in from the Strait of Juan de Fuca or you come in through the Strait of Georgia. There's no other option unless they're taking a train from somewhere, okay? So we have a lot of good coverage. There's several research organizations, there's lots of whale watching companies. If you're coming in, someone's probably going to see you. So we have an opportunity here to potentially photograph all of the humpback whales in this population. And that would be really important. You could apply what we learn here to other places in the world, like California, for example, where it's an open ocean conditions. There's no way that you could ever know that you had seen every humpback whale. So what we learn here could be very, very important elsewhere. Really quickly, another thing we get from Happywhale, this is what I focus on, family trees. You can see this is Heather's entire family tree that we know of so far. By starting from no humpbacks, it's easy to keep track of who belongs to who. Entanglement. Happywhale can help us with entanglement. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans in Canada thinks that up to 50% of our humpback whales here have been entangled at least some point in their life. It's one of their biggest threats. So Happywhale can help by helping us know exact identities of whales as well as their locations. Last summer we had a whale 5 that was seen in late July with rope in the whale's mouth. We saw the whale from Port Angeles about a week later and did not think that it had rope in its mouth at that time. But because we were able to match that whale, we could tell all the other whale watching boats in the area, look for this whale specifically, look and see if it looks like it's entangled. And after multiple re-sightings, we were able to determine that this whale freed itself. So we do not believe that that whale was entangled any longer. But you know, that was over a course of a week. Sometimes entanglements last months and months and months, and so something like Happywhale would be good in, you know, you would get an alert when that whale moved to a different area. You'd have a place to kind of start your general search. Also good for monitoring long-term health. I mentioned that you don't have to just submit tail pictures. You can submit dorsals as well. This is a whale Trooper. 2018, unfortunately, Trooper was hit by a boat. But really quickly, just a couple months later, healed up pretty nicely, and we also saw Trooper all throughout 2019, so it looks like that injury is healing. PSA, really quick, if you see, oh, blow, go slow. Please slow down if you see whales. And a couple of years ago, this whale warning flag really went into effect around here. Yeah, so if you see a boat out on the water that is flying that flag, it means there is a whale within a kilometer of the boat, so please make sure you slow down. And finally, maybe the most important thing that Happywhale is doing for us here in the Salish Sea is inspiring conservation. You know, people care about what they know. And it's one thing to read about humpback whales or to see them in a documentary, but if you actually go out and see a whale in person, you feel that strong connection. So imagine how strong that connection is if not only do you see that whale once, but you get updates about where your whale is, if that whale has had a baby, how they're doing. It just makes it that much more of an investment in conserving the ecosystem. So big thanks to Happywhale and Ted especially. Again, he's in Antarctica for several weeks, so he was really great about basically sending me everything and hoping for the best. So thanks to him. Cascadia and MERS are both awesome humpback whale resources in this area. MERS up in Canada, Cascadia here in Washington, and then of course thanks to Orca Network for having me today. No time for questions, we gotta go to eat lunch, but I'll be at lunch so you can track me down, or this is my email address if anyone has any questions for me, feel free to send those my way.